Okay, Mr. Udell here with a recap of some of the concerns about the Electoral College. What I want to remind us before we even start talking about this is all of the things we're talking about now are supposed to help people get messages into the government. And we've already seen there are different ways to run an election, like, for example, all the different decision rules we talked here. We know that we have primaries that have an unusual set of decision rules, but at the moment what we're talking about is the Electoral College. And these are the slides that we reviewed the other day. So the first concern, in essence, is that the winner of the popular vote can lose. That's nice that it's in the wrong color. We can just leave it like that for a minute. The winner of the popular vote can lose the election. So how can that happen? Well, it happens this way. In our Electoral College, we don't really, everybody will report this on the news, but we don't really care who wins the national vote total as far as the Electoral College goes. As it said in our decision-making rule, Pennsylvania, in our little pretend state here that only has country that only has 2 states, Pennsylvania has 5 electors. Those electors are driven by the results here in Pennsylvania. And once again, here in Pennsylvania, where people know Mr. Worrell, he's the only one who voted for himself. Even his wife voted for me. At any rate, I get all of Pennsylvania's 5 electoral votes. Then in California, where Mr. Worrell was able to bamboozle some people, he beat me by a single vote. Now, because all our states use a winner-take-all system, Mr. Worrell is going to get 10 electoral votes to my 5, and despite the fact he's behind in the popular vote by basically 50%, or I have 100% more than him, depending on how you want to look at it, he is the winner. Why might this be considered a criticism when it comes to this? Well, because most people said Udell, sadly, and fewer people said Worrell. But what did they get? They got Worrell. That's why it's considered a criticism. Next up was a slide that looked like this. The way our representative system is set up is it is roughly meant to represent all the people of the United States. And we've chosen states here, Wyoming and California, as the least and most populated state. California is supposed to be 66 times more powerful than it comes to Wyoming, if you were working in terms of a straight democracy, but we're not. Our House of Representatives doesn't give perfect representation, in that California is only 53 times as powerful as Wyoming. And then when you get to the Senate, where every state gets 2 senators, regardless of how small its population is, Wyoming launches way ahead, and it ends up being only 18 times as weak as California, even though it should be 66 times as weak. So as we saw in this before, each Wyoming resident, or I guess this way, every elector only has to represent 134,000 people in Wyoming, whereas in Florida, even though I know you can't read that down there, it says basically 1 for 480,000. Once again, going back to our first slide, if the people are speaking into the black box, why should the people of Wyoming's voice be louder per person than that of California? Why should the voters of Texas be weaker than those of Delaware? Well, if you were really thinking democratically, you would say they shouldn't, but in our system, and every system has quirks, that is one of the quirks. Okay, next slide. So in this slide, what we're going to say is 2 things. One that I didn't really talk about in class the first time is just this entire mess right here. There are some people who might see that, and say, you know what really difference does my vote make? They're just going to go and do what they want anyway. That's false. It's possible they could go and do what they want, but as it turns out, these electors have always done what the voters in their states have told them to do. There has never been an election where the Electoral College said, yeah, I know the people said this, but we're going to do something else, right? The only time the popular vote loses is when there is one of those quirks like we described in the first slide. However, the second criticism that people might point out on this slide is this one. Andrew Jackson. If we had a candidate today winning the popular vote by 13% who didn't become president, I would hope people would be outraged. But because of where his votes were concentrated, we can see that he only barely squeaked by, and not with a true majority in the Electoral College, but a plurality. So as the rule stated, the top 3 candidates move on into the House of Representatives. Henry Clay was the Speaker of the House. He hates Andrew Jackson. And of the 24 states existing at the time, Adams got 13 of them. Adams got 13 of them with Clay's help. Once again, going back to our first slide, 43% of the people say they want a candidate, right? The next candidate only gets 30. What do they get? The next candidate. This would be seen as undemocratic and something that people probably would not be very tolerant of. Our last slide was about the quirkiness of, again, it's basically dealing with this winner-take-all phenomenon. Because we know the election is winner-take-all, places like Texas and California and Idaho, for that matter, and Oregon, there's no point in campaigning there. There's no point in spending campaign dollars. If you are a red voter, a Republican voter in California, Oregon, Illinois, Michigan, New York, there's an argument to be made that your vote is wasted. You are not going to be counted in the Electoral College. If I'm a blue voter, so to speak, a true blue Dem, and you're in Texas, Arizona, Oklahoma, or Georgia, we can make the same argument. Your vote doesn't count. There is no way in the next few elections where Republicans are going to get any control over awarding electoral votes in Illinois, or Democrats are going to get any electoral control over awarding votes from Oklahoma. It's just not going to happen. So we know that the campaigns will focus all their energy and all their attention on these very few voters who become exceedingly important. The Ohios, the North Carolinas, the Floridas, the Colorados, the Nevadas. So why is it that a Democratic voter in Colorado should be so much more important than one in Wyoming? Why is it that a Republican voter in Nevada should be so much more important than one in California or Texas? It doesn't seem democratic or fair. Those are the criticisms of the Electoral College. Hope that helps.